Hi, this is Theresa with One Inspiring Woman, and today we are talking about Chiron in retrograde in the sign of Aries. That's right. That's right. I know we've got Chiron in retrograde. Let me give you a couple of the old stats for him, and then we'll kind of be talking about how he's really affecting us now. So really, March 29th, Chiron enters retrograde, so kind of pre-shadow energy. On July 22nd, he enters a full retrograde until December 26th, so we haven't gotten there yet. And then on December 26th, he stations and turns direct until April 18th of 2024. And so Chiron is kind of like a minor planet or a comet or an asteroid. Everybody kind of describes them a little bit differently. But I will tell you that one of the things that's really interesting is Chiron is really affecting a lot of people, kind of bringing up things from our past. And this is kind of Chiron's energy. This is what Chiron does. Chiron does this all the time. Chiron is kind of like our wounded healer, and he helps us bring up things so we can work on them and heal them. It's kind of like when we hide something, it's one of those, it's not really gone, it's just hidden. We're just not dealing with it. And so that's kind of one of those amazing energies with Chiron, is to really understand how Chiron is working with us. And I will tell you that kind of one of the interesting things is because Chiron is so far out, Chiron doesn't just help our individualists. You know what I'm saying? Like the planets just right around us are kind of more of those personal planets. But the ones that are really far out there, those are the ones that are kind of working on globally. And it's usually big groups of people. This could be like large cities, states, countries, governments, all kinds of stuff. So it's one of those, over the last few months, I will say since July 22nd, we have been seeing countries work through old wounds, healing things, kind of coming out with the truth so we can do it. Because a lot of times if you're not saying the truth, like if I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, my side hurts, then we just think everything's normal. We don't realize that that person is in pain. So it's kind of like everybody's kind of like voicing those things out, voicing that energy of like, bring this out so we can kind of bring attention to it so we can continue to heal this. And this is something that really affects so many people and, like I said, so many governments. And we've kind of seen this over the last couple of months or so. I think that's kind of one of those like, oh my gosh, this is interesting. I will tell you, I've even seen it individually with clients, people that are really desiring to kind of go back into this lifetime as a child. Like, I want to look at my lifetime and I want to know like why I was affected this way or why I still have this issue. Sometimes it's, why don't I have any memories? A lot of times, like, people come to me and go, can you tell me what my memories are, because I don't have them. It's one of those, like, we've covered it up. It doesn't mean that it's gone. It's just we've covered it up and we aren't working through it. We're not dealing with it. We're not like, oh my gosh, here we go. So that's one of those interesting energies. It's never gone. It's always out there. We've got to work on these things though. And I guarantee you, they're not easy. I have worked on stuff from my childhood for years. And it is kind of scary. It is kind of like one of those, like, oh my gosh, this is amazingly weird that it's like, okay, I'm dealing with this and how do I work through all of these things? And it really does make a difference of how we work through this. Now, I will guarantee you, because of the history of Chiron, and Chiron right now is in the sign of Aries, which is all about kind of like that fiery energy of like let's bring this up. Let's kind of talk about all this stuff, kind of bringing up kind of like our need for support, finding our own inner strength, really finding the confidence and the courage to keep going on. I know personally, when I've been working on my stuff in the past, there are sometimes I'm like, I just got to know that there's a good memory out there. There has got to be a good memory out there, because a lot of times our psyche will hide everything from us and not realizing like this is a good memory and this is a bad memory. They're just hiding everything. So it's like, no, this is horrible. So understand that it is. Now, Chiron right now, because Chiron is in the sign of Aries, it is bringing up a lot of things that require healing. And a lot of times in our past, we've had a lot of like civil movements, civil rights movements, people fighting for their freedom, fighting for a voice, fighting to get like their old wounds, not necessarily healed, but spoken about so they can move all of that. Because if someone's in that energy of like, we can't do that because we're women, or we can't do that because we're this color, whatever it is, that energy kind of keeps those people stuck. And until we kind of face it, like, this is what we've done as a society, we've got to work through it. So it's kind of like, okay, here we go. Let's move through this. And I will tell you, every time that Chiron is in the sign of Aries, there is a lot of global turmoil in changing a lot of energy. So it's like, oh my gosh. So I guarantee you, with Chiron in retrograde right now in the sign of Aries, there is going to be, and there has been, a lot of turmoil. Some of it is minor turmoil, and some of it is like, bring it all on. Let's bring it all out so we can take a look at it. I will tell you that this is kind of one of those energies of like, oh my gosh. There's also a lot of things coming up with technology as well. The last time Chiron was in Aries, there was a lot of energy coming forward in kind of like the technology sectors of like kind of bringing up kind of like the creation of Microsoft, Apple computers, videotapes. The first man walked on the moon. So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, that was just the last one that we were working with. So this is kind of one of those energies. This is the last one. I mean, Chiron in Aries, not anything else, but it's one of those. So this kind of brings up, and it also kind of really defines that era. If you talk about like 1968, 1969, it's one of those, everybody will talk about like walking on the moon. We got to the moon. We did this. And it's really those, literally those definitions of our era that we've got to really work on. And thinking outside the box is going to be like, yes, it's almost going to be like, that's the basics. Everybody's got to think outside the box. Everybody has to look at this in a different way than we've looked at it in the past. So it's like, yes, we've got to work through this. Globally, I have seen already a lot of new technology come out, a lot of people trying to like work through things, or kind of like bring out the best way to do things, or kind of bring up that energy. I will tell you that a lot of times, also in Chiron in Aries, people have a lot of identity crisis. And I don't mean like, I don't know who I am, but it's one of those, they're trying to define themselves. They are trying to define not only themselves, but their energy, their movement, their kind of like, I don't know what I am. I don't know how I want to work through this. So it's really a great way to kind of, people are challenged to really express themselves differently than they have in the past. Like, I want a new definition for me. I don't want to go by anybody's old definition. I want a new definition for me. And I want to do that. So it's one of those, that's kind of one of those like inner works for ourselves that we've got to work on for us, so that we can bring a new healing to our world. This can be amazing. One of the things that I get is a lot of times, a lot of people will start saying the ego has to die. Every time Chiron is in the sign of Aries, people are like, the ego has to die. It's horrible. It's bad. It's blah, blah, blah. Your ego is not bad. You have to take care of you. Now, an inflated ego, not good. A really excessive ego where I have to dominate everybody, that's not good. No bueno for nobody. I mean, bad, bad, bad. But I will tell you, a lot of times it's really a great time for us to kind of really understand where we are and kind of like what's coming forward and what do we want to define ourselves as. I will tell you, kind of one of those things is like, we have got to really focus on what's coming up, our core. Who are we on the inside? And a lot of times, like I said, a lot of people think like, oh, the ego is bad, but it's not. It's a very important part. As long as your ego is in balance, your ego's fine. Sometimes we have to put it aside for a few minutes and like, okay, let me get to this new concept and then I'll bring my ego back in. But your ego is not demonic or evil or bad or anything else. You have to honor you and honor what's coming in and around you, so you can honor what's coming up for you and the changes that you're ready to step into. If you're not ready for those, it's one of those, that's the hard part. You got to know where your ego is. And a lot of times, if you want to know, ask your friends and family. They will tell you usually pretty honestly, like, yep, you got a big ego. And that's when we need to get it back in balance. But if your ego's in a great balance, a lot of times, like, you're not stressed about things. You're not dealing with a lot of old stuck energy. So that's kind of the good part about it. So let's do a couple of angel cards about Chiron in full retrograde right now. So this one is truth and integrity. This is the truth about where you are and what you're working on, and understanding your ego's not bad. It's just we've got to keep that in balance, and that checks and balances for us is really important to keep this going. Our guardian angel, a lot of times when we're working on our ego or kind of things of like defining ourselves, our archangels, our guardian angels are coming in strongly to really work with us at this time frame, not against us. They're working with us. They're showing us things that we really need to keep going. Nature, it is our nature. These planets and asteroids and other things, they really do affect us. They really do. So many times people are like, no. Until you start following them. I was kind of the same way until many years ago when I was like, oh my gosh, these really do. And they affect everybody in different ways. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is amazing. Focus on healing you. Focus on bringing up things that you're ready to work on, and work on them the best you can. And sometimes you may have to set your ego aside for a few minutes to kind of get a new concept, and then bring your ego back in on board, because your ego requires healing as well. I thank you so much for joining me today, and I know that we'll be talking again soon.